My name is Wayne Allen. I'm the CEO of Insurance Thought Leadership, and today I'm joined by Guy Fraker, our Chief Innovation Officer, and Matt Mosier, the COO of AM Best. Matt, Guy,
Hi, Wayne.
Thanks for joining us. So Matt, we had the good fortune of chatting last year's ITC, and at that opportunity to talk, you introduced the notion that AM Best was going to consider introducing innovation into your process of evaluating companies and stuff like that. And then in March of this year, AM Best came out with an announcement that in fact you were going to incorporate innovation into the way you analyze companies. So can you speak to what's happened throughout 2018 and where
Sure.
you're at?
Yeah. Well, this summer we put out a survey that talked about, or that went to all the companies that we rate around the globe, over 1,500 rated units as we group companies together, not individual companies, but groups. Of those 1,500, we got back over 450, almost 500 survey responses. We are able to look at that and take that survey and look at where companies are in terms of how critical do they view the idea of innovation to their business process. What are the key areas they're going to utilize innovation? They're focused on innovating. What are the key areas that they feel will have the greatest impact? What are the barriers to being able to innovate that they have? We put out a study just last week that talks about that, and we're going to take that study and that information and work with that as we move through building the evaluation process, a criteria procedure for evaluating the level of innovation in an insurance company.
Right. So the survey was intended not to be a measuring tool, but to be a discovery tool.
Exactly. To gather information, for us to get an idea where people are at, where companies are at, as well as to share information for the industry. Start to give them more information about where is everybody else at. How important does the industry view the idea of innovation? And we found it was viewed to be very strongly either critical or somewhat critical to the success of an organization.
Right. So what was the general response? Did you find that the incumbents were positively oriented toward the notion of including innovation? Were they critical of having to do this? What was their feedback?
I'd say we have not had a critical aspect from any response that we've had. Upwards of 80% of the industry was considered it critical or somewhat critical. We've had some companies that wrote back and said, look, I really don't have anything to offer at this point. I got a lot of work to do, but I don't have anything to offer in terms of the survey. But it certainly didn't come back saying, I don't have anything to offer because this is important. They knew it was important, but they knew they had a lot of work to do.
So Matt, here we are at this InsurTech Connect, and there's a tremendous volume of activity going on. And I'm curious as to your observations on what you've noticed in the change from last year's event to this year's event, and to what degree do you believe AM Best weighing in has been an influence on this volume of activity?
Well, I think our weighing in and making it a more critical issue and looking at it more closely relative to the rating certainly has brought interest from the companies, particularly those that we rate, but it's just one portion. I mean, this is an issue that everybody kind of understands needs to be part of where you're going in the future. We're seeing more and more interest from startups, from companies, either direction, of how do I innovate, how do I make myself more efficient. The insurance industry itself has to improve its efficiency. When you look at an expense structure as where it stands now, there's many other sources of capital, there's many other risk transfer type mechanisms. The industry has to improve on that. That's one of the reasons why we're looking at it, because if one group's doing it, everybody's got to start doing it, because it just is one of these things of if you're not doing it, you're disadvantaged. So it is a process by which it makes it important to everybody, but it is important because of the cost structure. And certainly you see this conference and the level of growth we've seen here, the interest is extremely high, and I just don't see it ebbing at any time soon.
One of the things that's always been so fascinating for us in our work, helping companies innovate, is not the technology side of innovation so much as the human aspect of it. And so since making the announcement and deciding to explore these opportunities in the ratings, how has AM Best, how have you and your team benefited or been impacted by wading into this and looking at the innovation? Has it had an impact on, if you will, the innovation skill sets within AM Best? And
Absolutely. I think first of all, there's a better understanding within AM Best, and the understanding it is. You raise the point. It's not just about technology. It's about the culture that you build and the willingness to look at things differently and try things differently. It really has just changed our team in that regard, in our criteria space, in our research space, of looking at different aspects of things. So the angle that we look at has certainly changed. Driven by the understanding and the fact that systems aren't everything. Culture is a huge thing.
So it's interesting. Some of the insurtechs are full stack companies. Not a lot of them, but some of them. At what point do you think those companies have to start looking at AM Best as providing a rating to them? At what point do ratings become important for a kind of a startup?
Well, I mean, first of all, there are some companies out there that are up, running, and the profitability just isn't there. When you have a loss ratio over 100, their rating, they're not really something that we could provide any view of, hey, they're an ongoing entity without getting more capital put into it. So the model doesn't work in that regard. But certainly we're seeing some with technology, some of these technology companies are starting to look at it. They have books of business, they've basically worked as an MGA. That's where we're seeing some of the companies looking for a rating, where they're looking at it and saying, we have a book of business, a solid book of business. We're going to start looking at it now. We're going to put it on our own paper, and we're going to look for a rating. But they've built a solid book of business working with insurance companies. In some cases, some of the startups haven't had the level of insurance expertise embedded within the companies, and you see that in the loss ratio. It's one thing to have a high expense ratio and have losses because of your building scale. It's another thing to have a high loss ratio, and how do you get beyond that and start to bring business in where premium is more than losses. It's obviously a critical point to the success of any insurance company.
Well, I have to ask one question, because we facilitated a workshop on Monday where we actually had someone come in and basically surprise the room by announcing that they were entering the market as a primary carrier. This is a global auto manufacturer. Now they followed up that announcement with a question that basically was, does anybody here want the job? Providing some form of white label solution. Do you see, is AM Best getting contacted or pinged, if you will, by potential new entrants into the market?
We haven't really gotten calls about, hey, we want to enter the market, we want a rating, but certainly we're hearing those aspects of companies like that, global auto manufacturer that kind of looks at it as like, look, you're not giving credit for the safety aspects of our autonomous cars. So if the risk is not evaluated properly and a company can do it better, we're hearing that there's interest from many different areas of, I can look and I can evaluate the risk better, I can do a better job. Therefore, I will start to provide insurance on my aspect of my business.
Interesting. That's great.
So what's so you made the announcement, you came out with a survey, you got some feedback. What's next? What's the process look like?
Well, as I mentioned to Guy, our team's really kind of looking at it, really picked up the idea of the cultural aspect and looking at different changes. One of the key things now is to go forward and develop that criteria procedure for how do we evaluate the level of innovation within a company. Now, that's not something, as much as my team has evolved and has improved its process, that's not something we're going to do alone. We've always heard about diversity being an extremely important part of innovation. Well, from us, the aspect of diversity is sharing our thoughts and where we think we're going to go and getting a lot of feedback. So we'll be putting out a draft criteria probably early next year that will talk about how we're going to evaluate the level of innovation that a company has, and it'll be out for comment. And those comments will play an extremely important role in the final development of what our criteria procedure is going to look like. we know this isn't something that a single group of people is going to have the answer. We're talking to a lot of different people, getting that feedback, drawing that in, and hopefully get to a good answer for the evaluation of innovation and the level of innovation, because it's an important piece. It's already in our methodology. We look at the innovation of a company and we consider it, but now we feel we have to put out a criteria procedure that says this is how we really do look at it. And down the road, I think we're going to have to go and look at our methodology and look at the level of weight that innovation carries in the evaluation of business profile and the overall financial strength of a company.
You know, I'm sorry, I have to weigh in here though and say, I realize this probably wasn't one of AM Best's goals, but you're providing a really remarkable story that can be very instructive, I think, to a lot of incumbent companies, because you are taking this collaborative approach, you are taking this very transparent approach to something that, you know, arguably the fair amount of question I think last year was, is it even possible? And you've answered that. And just, I have to compliment you and your team on this approach. You're providing a remarkably instructive case study on how to do this right.
Yeah.
And so props and compliments to you and your team on how you've approached this.
Yeah, thank you. And I think a lot of it came, we went through our overall methodology update, and we had a lot of back and forth and feedback there, and we learned, you know, that was the best approach. Get the information out early, make sure people understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and share your outcomes and consider the feedback, and know that you don't have the right answer when you start. And you got to continue to evolve. I mean, innovation is about continual evolution.
Absolutely.
That's what we're looking to do with this.
Yeah.
That is so powerful, because so part of what's been, you know, I think holding the insurance industry up is this notion of entering into solving problems that they don't already have answers to. And this is an industry that wants to have a perfectly baked answer. Yeah. And what you just said is so powerful. It's wonderful.
In fact, it kind of creates competing priorities, right? Because traditionally, the board directs the C-suite to pursue profit or whatever their traditional motivation was. Oftentimes, if not all the time, innovation is at odds with that directive, right? So, gosh, do I pursue innovation? Do I pursue profit, or whatever my traditional motivation was? And how does a C-suite respond to that? And how do you incorporate that human behavior from the top down to facilitate kind of a culture of innovation, but at the same time, you got to manage your loss ratio, your combined ratio, and all that.
Well, absolutely. You mentioned it is top down, and it's cultural, and you have to put the right incentives in place. When you look at, we're looking for profits, and you're driving profits. Well, down the road, you need to continue to be innovative to service your customer with the proper policy, do it in an efficient manner, have the best business processes out there so that you can be profitable. So if you're not innovating and the guy next door is innovating, your profits will not materialize down the road. So you need that culture of looking at innovation. How can you constantly improve? I look at innovation as really, there's so many different aspects of innovation. The basic issue is constant improvement. How can I do things better? And if you have people in your organization that are looking at that, you're going to come out successful. But then you need the culture that allows those people that are coming up with ideas to do things better, to get those ideas implemented.
Right. It's one thing to process ideas. It's one thing to kind of go through them. It's another thing to turn them into actionable steps and make things happen, right? So, Guy, I know that you, on behalf of ITL, spend a ton of time with the Institutes, one of our significant partners, in the development of a curriculum to create a way, or to help educate the industry on how to go through an innovation process. Mm-hmm. And can you visit a little bit with Matt about how that kind of bumps into what they're doing from a rating and an evaluation perspective?
Sure. We recently, as you know, completed a survey with the Institutes on the state of innovation practices, and be interesting, we have not had the opportunity to compare notes, but one of the things that came through in the survey was concern and I think some confusion about the workforce's involvement and their readiness and preparedness for engaging just in the work of innovation. And we're very excited about the fact that we're launching, as of this week, getting ready to launch the first on-demand online curriculum to teach innovation best practices and make that curriculum available to the workforce at large. What's your reaction? In your studies, have you found similar questions about workforce readiness? And what do you think about an online curriculum?
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a huge benefit to the industry. One of the things that we found is a lot of companies still struggling for what is it? What am I supposed to be doing here? What are the issues I'm supposed to be looking at? And a curriculum that helps them look at how to develop an innovative organization and build that culture, and it kind of explains what the important issues are to an innovative organization is tremendous. It just helps spread the word in terms of how to get started, because for what we're seeing from companies for the most part is that fear. It's like, it seems like such a big issue, they don't know where to start.
Right.
And if there's something out there that helps illustrate kind of the steps and provides that to them, I think that's a perfect example of what we need in the industry for them to continue to move forward. Again, it's all about just looking to do things in a better way and having a culture that allows that. And I imagine the curriculum probably ties right into something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say one of the great joys that we have when we are face-to-face teaching innovation best practices is when companies all of a sudden realize, wow, this is a lot simpler than we thought. Mm-hmm. And in building out this framework requires so much less resource than what we thought, even though the back end of it can be game-changing.
Right.
And so I appreciate those comments. It is going to be overall a three or four course curriculum that includes some focus on technologies, but most of it is about the human side, being the human side of solving problems that you don't have answers to when you first go into it.
But the really interesting thing about it is it doesn't take an army of people to actually innovate, right? Constraints in small teams actually turns out, we've proven over and over, can innovate very quickly and very effectively. But what a broad-based understanding or equipping of innovation understanding means is that your culture broadly is more adoptive of what you're trying to do, which speaks right to what you were saying, Matt.
Absolutely.
Well, congratulations on the progress so far, and thanks for coming in here and sharing the progress to date with us.
Yeah.
And look forward to watching and hearing the updates as you continue on this journey that AM Best is on with the industry.
Thank you.
All right.